Alma lived in busy Accra, Ghana, where life was full of noise and promise. To her, her husband Kwame looked like a hard-working man, always claiming late nights at the office were, for their future. She trusted him, proud of his sharp suits and confident smile. But one ordinary afternoon, a letter from the bank slipped into her hands and turned her world upside down. Her name was on a loan agreement worth $85,000. She had never signed such a thing. Her fingers shook as she read the bold numbers, the heavy stamp, the cruel truth staring back at her. Her first thought was confusion. Had there been a mistake? But as she asked quiet questions around town, the pieces fell together like broken glass. People whispered about a grand house rising on the edge of the city. A house bigger than anything she and Kwame had ever dreamed of. A house not meant for her. They said it was for another woman, a woman who laughed too loudly at Kwame's jokes and walked proudly with his shadow by her side. Alma felt her chest tighten as if the air had been stolen from her. The money tied to her name, the debt she never touched, was feeding bricks, paint, and marble floors for someone else's palace. She could almost hear the echo of betrayal in every hammer strike on that house. In that moment, Alma understood, Kwame's long nights were not for their future. They were for hers, the mistress she never chose. Alma did not run to Kwame with questions or tears. She kept her pain inside her chest, like a fire that burned quietly. She told no one, not even her closest friend. She knew if she shouted too soon, Kwame would deny everything, and the truth would slip through her fingers. So instead of rushing blindly, she chose silence. That silence gave her strength. One morning, she put on a simple dress, wrapped her scarf tightly, and went to the edge of town where people said the new house was being built. The air was full of dust and the sharp sound of hammers. Men carried bricks, mixing cement, raising walls higher and higher. And then she saw him. Kwame. Not tired, not stressed, not working late as he always claimed. He was there, smiling with ease, his arm wrapped casually around another woman's shoulders as if she were his true wife. The woman leaned into him, her laugh bright and careless, while workers built a house that was paid for with Alma's stolen name. Alma froze, but her heart did not. It screamed inside her chest. She wanted to rush forward, to shout, to tear the whole lie apart in front of them. But she stood still. She did not speak. Her silence was louder than any scream. She looked at the house carefully, the polished wood, the wide windows, the proud frame already taking shape. Every nail, every stone was a mark of betrayal. It was not just a house. It was a monument to Kwame's lies. And yet, Alma knew one thing, this very house would not stand as their victory. It would become her weapon. When she walked away, her feet felt heavy, but her mind was sharp. She was no longer a woman in shock. She was a woman with a plan. She decided she would not waste her revenge in anger on a dusty street. No, Kwame's downfall would be greater than that. It would be public. It would be unforgettable. He had built a house in her name for another woman, but Alma would build a moment in history with his shame. She thought of the community that respected him, the friends who admired him, the family who praised his hard work. She imagined their faces when the truth came crashing down, and that thought lit a fire in her eyes. That evening, she sat alone in her room. She replayed the image of Kwame's arm around the woman, the laughter, the house, the weight of the loan. Instead of breaking her, it shaped her into something stronger. She began to gather evidence. Every paper, every receipt, every careless message Kwame had left. She kept them safe, like weapons waiting for the right battle. She knew one day soon, in front of all the people Kwame wanted to impress, she would strike. She would not just expose him. She would destroy the image he had built, the empire he thought untouchable. Alma's silence had become her power, and her revenge was only beginning. Kwame thought he was untouchable. In his arrogance, he decided their wedding anniversary would be the perfect stage to show off his success. He booked a grand hotel in Kumasi, decorated the hall with gold ribbons and flowers, and invited friends, business partners, and family. To him, it was not really about celebrating his marriage. It was about parading his wealth, showing the world the image of a powerful man who had everything under control. He sent the invitation to Alma with a proud smile, thinking she would be flattered. He never suspected that behind her calm eyes, Alma had already written the script for his downfall. Alma accepted the invitation without a word of protest. She smiled softly, thanked him, and pretended to be the loyal wife. But deep inside, she was preparing her moment. For weeks she had been gathering evidence, keeping every bank statement, every photo, every careless voice note Kwame left on her phone. She spoke to the hotel staff in secret, arranging for the microphone to be hers when the time came. She told the cameraman exactly where to stand so every angle would capture what was about to unfold. The guests who thought they were attending a celebration had no idea they were walking into a storm. On the night of the party, Alma dressed carefully. She chose her brightest Kent cloth, colors so bold they shone like fire under the lights. Her head wrap was tied high, her jewels glittered, and her smile was calm, almost too calm. Anyone who looked at her saw a proud wife ready to honor her marriage. But only Alma knew the truth, this was not a celebration. It was an execution. Every step she took into that hall was steady, every movement precise. Kwame, blind in his pride, walked around greeting guests, shaking hands, laughing loudly, and lifting glasses of champagne. He looked at Alma with the smugness of a man who thought he had fooled everyone. The other woman sat quietly at the back, dressed elegantly, trying to blend in, confident that she was hidden in the crowd. None of them realized that Alma had planned this night down to the very second. As the music played and the room filled with chatter, Alma sat silently, her eyes scanning the hall. She saw the faces of people who admired Kwame, the people who believed in his lies. She knew how shocked they would be when the truth came crashing down. She felt the power in her silence, a storm wrapped in a smile. While Kwame thought he was hosting a party for his own glory, Alma knew she was hosting the night that would destroy him. The mic was ready, the cameras were waiting, and the audience was about to witness the greatest performance of her life. She sat back in her chair, her heart steady, her mind sharp, and whispered to herself, "Tonight, everything changes." The music slowed, the lights softened, and all eyes turned to Kwame as he proudly raised his glass. He cleared his throat, ready to give the speech he thought would crown him king of the night. But before a single word left his lips, Alma rose from her chair. Her steps were calm but firm as she walked to the stage. She reached for the microphone with steady hands, her Kent cloth glowing under the lights like flames. The room grew quiet, expecting a sweet tribute from a wife to her husband. But Alma's first words sliced through the silence like a sharp knife. "This toast," she began, her voice strong and clear, "is for the man who stole $85,000 in my name. Not for me, not for us, but for the woman sitting at the back of this very hall." Gasps erupted. Glasses froze midair. Heads spun toward the back, where a woman in a glittering dress sat frozen, her smile collapsing into fear. Phones were pulled out instantly, cameras flashing, red lights blinking. The guests could not believe what they had just heard. A wedding anniversary had turned into a battlefield. Kwame's confident grin vanished as if someone had ripped it off his face. He tried to laugh, tried to wave it away as a joke, but Alma's eyes told everyone this was no performance. She held up her hand, commanding silence, and the room obeyed. The weight of her words pressed against every chest in that hall. The mistress shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her eyes darting toward the exit, but the crowd had already pinned her down with their stares. Alma's voice grew sharper, stronger, each word hitting harder than the last. "While I stayed at home, believing in his hard work, he was busy building a palace in my name. Not for me, not for our children, but for her." The hall buzzed with murmurs. Some people covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disbelief. A few already had their cameras pointed at Kwame, recording every second of his humiliation. Alma's eyes swept across the hall, landing on Kwame, who stood stiff, his glass trembling in his hand. "Tonight," she said, her voice steady but burning with fire, "you will all see the truth. You will all know the man behind the mask." The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The mistress could not move, Kwame could not speak, and the guests could not look away. In that moment, Alma stood taller than the chandeliers above her, no longer the silent wife in the shadows but the storm that had come to tear down the empire of lies. The party was over, and the real show had just begun. The hall was still heavy with shock when Alma tightened her grip on the microphone. Her eyes did not blink, her voice did not shake. "You think this is just my anger," she said, her words echoing off the walls. "No. I came prepared." With a small motion of her hand, the lights dimmed and the projector behind her came alive. Gasps filled the air as the first image appeared on the big screen, bank statements with Alma's name printed boldly at the top, the debt clear for everyone to see. Numbers glowed larger than life, and suddenly the whispers in the crowd grew louder. People pointed, hands covering their mouths, unable to believe that Kwame's so-called empire was built on his wife's stolen name. Kwame shifted nervously, his face pale under the lights. He tried to laugh again, but the sound cracked in his throat. Alma didn't give him a chance to recover. She clicked again, and a series of photos filled the screen, Kwame at the construction site, his arm around the mistress, smiling as if he owned the world. The very same man who had told Alma he was working late nights was caught in bright daylight, playing husband to another woman. The crowd erupted, some gasping, some shouting, some recording every second with their phones. Kwame's smirk was gone. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He was drowning in silence, and Alma's storm only grew stronger. She pressed one final button, and the room filled with the sound of his voice. Voice notes he had carelessly left on her phone played loudly through the speakers. His own words, his laughter, his promises to the mistress about their dream house struck the hall like thunder. People turned their heads away in disgust. Others whispered, "How could he?" The mistress, sitting stiff in her chair, tried to slide out quietly, but Alma's voice thundered again. "Stay right there," she commanded, pointing straight at her. "You thought I was blind, but I am the storm." Her voice shook the hall, and the woman froze, her eyes wide with shame. Everyone turned their cameras toward her now, recording her every twitch, every failed attempt to hide her face. The audience was no longer neutral. They had turned into Alma's army. Some clapped in support, some shouted insults at Kwame, while others laughed bitterly at the evidence flashing on the screen. The mighty man they once respected was stripped bare, his lies ripped apart in front of the world. Alma's presence filled the hall. She looked at Kwame, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "You wanted to fool me, but you fooled yourself. You wanted to shine, but I will be the light that exposes you." The evidence was undeniable, the proof unshakable. With every slide, every recording, Alma's storm tore down Kwame's empire. And as the crowd roared, the man who once stood proud now shrank into the shadows of his own disgrace. The hall was no longer a celebration. It had turned into a courtroom, and Alma was the judge. The crowd could not stay silent any longer. Some were shouting, others were laughing bitterly, and almost everyone had their phones lifted high, recording every second for the world to see. Kwame stood frozen in the spotlight, his face dripping with sweat, his chest rising and falling like a man gasping for air. But Alma was not finished. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing toward the woman at the back of the hall, the mistress who had once felt so untouchable. All cameras swung in her direction as Alma's voice thundered. "Enjoy the house," she said, her words sharp and steady, "because the law says it belongs to me. And you will live in its ruins when I am done." Gasps and cheers exploded together. Some people clapped, others laughed, and the mistress's face crumbled. Her painted smile was gone, replaced with trembling lips and wide, terrified eyes. She tried to look away, to shrink in her chair, but there was nowhere to hide. The room was against her, every lens catching her shame. The mistress shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse as though it could protect her, but Amma's words pinned her down like chains. You thought you could steal my name, my home, my life, Amma continued, her eyes never leaving the woman, but what you built on lies can never stand. I will watch it fall, brick by brick. The hall shook with noise, some people booed the mistress, others jeered, recording her every move to post online later. Kwame's friends, the very ones who used to sing his praises, began stepping back. Their whispers carried through the room. He's finished, one muttered. This is the end of him, another said, tilting his phone to capture Kwame's face of pure defeat. No one rushed to defend him. No one rushed to defend her. The couple who thought they could hide their betrayal were stripped bare in front of everyone who mattered. Amma, calm but burning with power, let the noise rise. She wanted the humiliation to sink deep, to cling to them forever. The mistress's eyes darted around, looking for a friendly face, but even those who once greeted her with sly smiles now turned away, unwilling to be seen on her side. She was alone, crushed by Amma's storm, buried by the very crowd she thought would never know her name. Kwame's empire was breaking right there in that hall. Not with fire, not with force, but with words, proof, and the unshakable dignity of the woman he had tried to destroy. The mistress sat frozen, Kwame stood broken, and Amma, wrapped in her bright Kent cloth, rose above them both, her voice echoing like thunder. You thought I was weak, she said softly, yet every ear heard her. But tonight, you learn what strength truly looks like. The hall was already in chaos, but Amma's eyes were calm, her step steady. She let the crowd roar and whisper until the noise began to fade, then reached slowly into her purse. Every movement drew eyes back to her. Phones zoomed in, flashes lit the stage, and the room held its breath as she pulled out a neat brown folder. She placed it gently on the mic stand, then opened it with deliberate care. Inside were divorce papers, signed and ready. The moment the papers touched the stand, the sound echoed like a drumbeat across the silent hall. Kwame, Amma said, her voice steady and sharp, cutting through the silence, today I don't just leave you. I bury you with your own lies. The room froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed. Kwame stood with his mouth open, his champagne glass still in his hand, trembling as though it might shatter. His skin gleamed with sweat under the golden lights. He tried to speak, to stammer some excuse, but no sound came out. The audience was no longer with him. Their silence was heavy, cold, and final. Then it happened. One clap broke the silence. Another followed. And then the hall exploded in applause, thunderous and unstoppable, rolling like a wave that swallowed everything else. People rose from their chairs, some whistling, some cheering, and others shouting Amma's name. Phones were lifted high, catching the moment as history. Kwame's protests, his shaking head, his desperate attempts to speak, were drowned in the storm of clapping and cheers. Amma stood tall, her chin lifted, her Kent cloth blazing under the lights. She looked like a queen delivering judgment in her own court. While Kwame shrank beside her, small and broken, she only grew larger. Her dignity rose higher than the chandeliers that sparkled above them. The applause was not just noise, it was power, respect, and justice. It was the sound of a community choosing her side, rejecting the man who had betrayed them all with his lies. Kwame finally tried to shout, his voice cracking as he reached for the mic, but the sound was swallowed instantly. No one cared. No one listened. Even his closest friends, the ones he trusted to stand by him, were busy recording his downfall, shaking their heads, whispering about how quickly a man could lose everything. Amma closed the folder, tucked it under her arm, and gave one last look at the crowd. Her eyes were not filled with tears but with fire. She did not see herself as a victim anymore. She was the storm that had washed away Kwame's false empire. It is finished, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, and walked off the stage to the sound of unstoppable applause, leaving behind a broken man and a room that would never forget the night she ended her marriage live. By the next morning, Alma's voice was everywhere. Clips of her speech flooded WhatsApp groups, Facebook timelines, and TikTok feeds. Every phone in Ghana seemed to be playing the same scene, a woman in bright Kent cloth standing tall as she exposed her husband and his mistress live on the mic. Headlines screamed in bold letters, "Wife exposes husband's mistress live at anniversary party." People replayed the video again and again, shaking their heads in disbelief, cheering for Alma's courage, and laughing at Kwame's stunned face. The damage to Kwame was instant. Banks that once trusted him sent messages cutting ties, unwilling to be linked with a man whose scandal was now the talk of the nation. Clients who had invested in his businesses cancelled contracts overnight, afraid his name would stain theirs too. His so-called empire, built on pride and lies, collapsed faster than it was ever built. The unfinished luxury house, the same one Alma had been forced into debt for, was seized under her name. The law was clear, the debt was hers, but so was the property. And Alma promised she would never let it become a home of comfort for her enemy. While Kwame's world crumbled, Alma walked away free. She did not hide or cry. She carried herself with dignity, her reputation untouchable, her story celebrated across the country. Women called her brave, men called her powerful, and children whispered her name with awe. The woman who had once kept her pain in silence had become a voice of fire. Her storm had destroyed lies, exposed betrayal, and lit up every screen in Ghana. Alma was no longer just a wife. She was a legend.